Before I saw The Flash, I remembered that when I was trying to get back into reading comics, I used to know this person, and this is pre-pandemic, and they were very much a fan of comics. And I remember they told me that there were two comics I needed to check out for my own well-being in terms of enjoying a really good story. The first one was obviously Secret Invasion, and the second one was Flashpoint. The irony is, who would have thought pre-pandemic that these two comic adaptations would be coming out one right after the other, same month, less than a week apart? And I remember when I started watching this film, because I have read Flashpoint, but I remember thinking maybe it's because I read it so long ago that my mind automatically said, this doesn't look like the Flashpoint I remember reading. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to For the Agenda. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Huang, and on this channel, I essentially watch mainstream content and let you know if it's worth your time because your time is valuable, and no one should tell you otherwise. Today, I'm going to be talking about the newest film from DC and Warner Brothers, The Flash. Now, I got to see an early screening of this. Thank you so much to Warner Brothers for the invitation. And I went into The Flash with rock bottom expectations. I'm not going to lie to you. I thought there were a lot of factors that contributed to this, the offset controversies that have happened, and a change in DC leadership that has me constantly wondering what's going to happen with the future of DC films. Are certain films going to matter? Are they not going to matter? Is this going to be a complete reset? Bunch of things that could be saved for an entire different video, an entire podcast episode when you think about it. But I went into this film open-minded, and I went into this film ready to be surprised because I had read some early reactions, some saying that this is one of the best superhero films of all time, which is a phrase I say for very special films. And seeing many people attend fan screenings in the States definitely felt like I needed to see what the buzz was, what was going on conversation wise. This is a non spoiler review, letting you know that as of now. And I want to clear this up. I am reviewing this from the perspective of it's a film. No personal opinions regarding people's past, what they have done, are going to be taken into consideration in terms of how I judge a performance. I 100% agree that certain actions that were committed are wrong, but we're going to focus on the film itself and what happened with my experience with the film. So, with all that being said, unfortunately, The Flash as a film didn't work for me. It was very much a mixed bag. So, here's the plot of the film. The Flash follows the classic Flashpoint storyline from the comics. Barry Allen travels back in time to save his mother and creates an alternate timeline. In this version, he creates a world without superheroes, and at this point is when the return of General Zod is going to be happening. Barry has to team up with a younger version of himself, Keaton's Batman, and newcomer Sasha Calle as Supergirl in order to restore the timeline and multiverse back to how it was. At this point, we've seen a lot of multiverse storylines going on. Some films and projects do it extremely well. Some films don't hit. Now, with this review, I'm going to start with pros. I'm going to start with the positives of what I liked about this film before I go into the cons, because you're going to see it's very much a mixed bag for me. To start us off, I feel fans of the DC project can rest assured that the main trailers haven't shown much of the film. There was a lot in this film that I did not see in the advertisements for this, and I think that's great because it allows fans to be surprised. People are used to seeing most of the film spoiled in a trailer these days as a way to sell it to audiences, and here there is definitely a lot I was not expecting to see based on those trailers. I think that's great. I like that element of surprise coming back to watching a film. Now, I didn't rewatch any already released DC films before watching this film as if I had homework to do. I considered rewatching Batman 1989, but I sat there and I let everything unfold before me and let it explain to me what was going to happen. And that's another aspect I will give this film credit for. The film allows for casual DC fans, even people who don't really always keep up with DC, to not feel like they have to do homework before watching this film. They can just walk in, sit back, and go along for the ride, because it's going to explain most things. And I think that part is great. Although, I'm not gonna lie, I do kind of have an urge now to rewatch Batman 1989 and the sequel. I also want to give props to Andy Muschietti, who does a really great job as the director. I feel his camera angles and the movements throughout the action sequences, I thought they were actually quite good. And it felt like you were seeing how you would imagine a comic being adapted as a film in your head. And he directed the dramatic moments very well. I felt those were some of the most moving and impactful parts of the film. Another highlight, of course, I loved seeing Michael Keaton's Batman. Seeing him in the suit again was the absolute highlight of this film. He proves he still got it. His action scenes were so cool. They were so good that I was like, I would have loved to have seen just a new Michael Keaton Batman film. It was so entertaining, and what I loved about what was done here with his character was that it wasn't just a complete play on nostalgia. He plays a mentor role here for Barry, and he says some iconic lines, which is great. And he also has a scene where he does one of the best jobs I've seen, like someone do explaining the multiverse. I think that is great. Sasha Calle also steals the show as Supergirl. I thought she was an absolute delight, who didn't have the most to do, unfortunately. This is where we start entering in some pros mixed with cons. I feel, unfortunately, she didn't have that much to do, but she made sure she stood out every time she was front and center on screen, and that is great. I also really liked her costume design. I think Sasha Calle was a standout of this film. And you know who else was a standout? Maribel Verdú as Barry's mom. I thought she was excellent. She brought so much heart into this film and sold those emotional moments for me. I thought she was just so good. And something else I liked about this film was when it focused on Barry's emotional beats with his mom. You can tell that the character hasn't really allowed himself to make peace with the situation that happens or grieve properly, thus going through every obstacle to try to get back what he felt was taken from him. I think those human moments were really nice to see. Seeing Barry's personal journey, I felt would have been a better exploration instead of what we end up getting in third act, which I'm going to go a little bit into detail in the cons. But essentially, when it focused on those emotional yet vulnerable sides, I actually felt the film was at its strongest because we're always used to seeing superheroes so strong, so, you know, great at saving the world. But how can you really save the world if you haven't managed to properly fix yourself? You can't fix the world if you haven't fixed yourself. That is very important. And I feel when the film tried to touch on those moments, I thought it was at its strongest. And it's a shame it didn't really go all the way. Felt it did a bit, but it could have done more. And another part where you see that kind of, I see what you were going for, but I would have loved if you had explored that a little more, was there's a moment here where Barry actually worries about someone's mental health after a sequence happens. The sequence I actually find to be questionable. I get the sequence was done for the sake of comedy, but I think I was more shocked by it rather than entertained. It happens first act. But in regards to the mental health aspect, I actually think that is something that is great to see in a superhero. You know, someone who is worried about who they're saving, what they're going to go through, how they're going to deal with this. Because this is something that could have been interesting to explore story wise, because that would have allowed for reflection upon themselves. You know, you kind of do see the emotional beats, but it's not to the degree that it could have been done. And it's such an interesting aspect you could explore within Barry, especially in this storyline, but you don't really see it. Not completely. Kiersey Clemens as Iris West does a good job with what she's given, but there wasn't much for her character to do, unfortunately. And that's kind of a shame because, you know, Barry Allen and Iris West are one of DC's iconic couples. Not the most iconic, but they're up there. Yet in this film, the chemistry unfortunately isn't there. And Kiersey Clemens does, again, the best she could with what she's given, but there's not a lot for her to do. So she can only do so much. But here, her work is actually really good. As for Ezra Miller's performance, they do a very good job in their dramatic moments. You know, as for the comedy side, I laughed a couple of times, and Miller does a pretty good job selling the jokes. However, After a while, and this is more on the film than on Miller, all of that comedy got in the way of a good story, and it didn't find that balance. In terms of a performance, this is very much Miller's film, especially with a dual role. And as an actor, they do quite well in the film, except for the chemistry with Kiersey Clemens as Iris West. To be Barry Allen, one of the very important things, aside from nailing the run, is the chemistry with Iris. You gotta sell that. The run was a chop for me. It did not work. I felt it was very much a more awkward version of Scott Pilgrim when he was meeting Ramona for the first time in the film. Now this is the part where we get into what I unfortunately did not connect with this film, what I did not like. Now, this film is very funny, and it was a lot funnier than I expected it to be. It had a lot of jokes. However, at one point, it feels like it's relying on humor rather than the Flashpoint story. And it's an overkill because of that. And I say that because I am someone who was surprised by the emotional beats in this film, how well they're done. Again, credit to Maribel Verdú. Who was phenomenal. But the beats weren't as strong as they could have been because they kept having at one point joke after joke after joke. You have a serious explanation, and you have joke and a joke setup and a joke setup. And after a while, you're like, we get it. You guys can sell the comedy. You can all sell the comedy. But let's focus on the story. And you lose that impact. It's not as meaningful as it could have been. Therefore, not every joke will stay with audience members because there were so many jokes. They're just like, right, but there was that joke and there was another joke throughout, and they're not as strong as they could have been. One of the best things about comedy is sometimes letting this joke sit. And that way, your audience not only remembers the joke, but is able to go, that was one of the best parts because they knew when to properly place the joke. Next thing is the visual effects. They do not look like they belong to this film that has an over $200 million budget. I know there's been a conversation about other films, other studios having a similar problem with VFX work. Yet when I saw this first big action set piece within the film, a part of it, to be honest, looked like a PlayStation 3 graphic. And that was great for its time when it came out. But VFX work has advanced so much since then. I mean, we're now on a PS5 at this point, and you don't expect to see some of that in 2023, but here we are. But in its defense, though, some parts did look cool. For example, Batman's parts, they looked great. When he goes in action, I felt the VFX were really strong and really good. When it comes to some of the Flash's moments, it didn't feel like they were done cooking, if you will. It felt like they needed a couple more tweaks to get some things right. Maybe it was meant to look like that, as if it was a nod to various styles clashing in relation to how Barry's situation causing worlds to collide. I'm not sure, but the visual effects didn't work for me. And this is a visual effects heavy film. And again, with the story, that's my other problem. That's my other main problem. The story here feels as if multiple versions of this film were written. And then somehow someone took all of those versions and then played with it like a Tetris puzzle and tried to make them all fit. But it doesn't fully come together. This film does try to handle a version of Back to the Future and Parent Trap with Barry Allen, and at times it works. At times it does work, but it could have been stronger. I felt, again, relying too much on comedy affects the script. If you focus more on a darker or a more emotional aspect, it could have been a stronger piece of work. And there were moments here where, again, they were nice moments and it felt like it was going somewhere. And you're like, okay, this is the film I signed up to see. We're getting there, we're getting there. And then it does nothing with it. It just goes nowhere and it goes back to comedy. And these occasional moments of fun or emotions were great to see. But then upon reflection, you wish that the movie went down that path where it doesn't have constant humor. It affects how meaningful or memorable the scenes could have been. And I think that's my main takeaway with this film. There was a great project here, but too many things got in the way to really make it as strong as it could have been. And the final nail in that coffin was, in fact, the third act, which has so much fan service and is so messy and make some choices that really, really bring the film down. One in particular, which is a spoiler if I mention it, but let's just say that when you realize what they do and what it essentially means within the scenario, you're just like, oh, when you think about it, that's not that cool. That's kind of not fair. It doesn't work. And makes you like the film less. And the third act itself, again, it feels so manic and distracting. It's as if they were trying to figure out the ending as they went along, but it just didn't work. It didn't stick to landing. And the third act is especially where you need to stick to landing. And the third act, it doesn't land to the point where you realize you're just like, well, perhaps the story didn't justify its existence, which was the case when I got out of the screening. I was like, well, that was a movie. And even the ending, I'm not a fan of the ending because by the time I got to the end, I was kind of annoyed. I'm like, I saw what you were trying to do, but you lost the momentum. I kind of get it, but it's not how I would have chosen to end this film. Now, there is a post-credit scene, and it's more of a fun post-credit scene, not an affecting the cinematic universe type of scene. One of my issues with this film is that because we know that there's potentially a DC reset maybe happening, the film's stakes didn't feel as real to me. It didn't feel like, oh my God, this could really change everything, or this is such an exciting story because anything could happen and it could affect going forward. The stakes didn't feel as real, and that brought down my enthusiasm for the film. You don't feel that sense of urgency in the story. You know they have to fix things because or else something bad's gonna happen. Fine. That's how a superhero film works. But there isn't that urgency that you feel as an audience member, that exhilarating scene where you're just like, okay, it's all on this scene now, or we don't know what's going to happen. You don't feel as excited. At least I didn't. Overall, I think DC fans may enjoy this film definitely more than I did. I really did want to like it, especially after hearing all of the hype about it, but it simply wasn't my cup of tea. I don't think it's one of the best superhero films ever made. I don't. Again, there are special films that hold that spot within my heart, and this film does not crack that list. And that is a high bar to reach with me, anyways. But I do feel that DC fans should go check this out, see for yourself, see where you stand. Maybe you love it, maybe you hate it. This film is definitely going to divide people who see it, but you should definitely know if you're a DC fan what side you're on. And if you are curious to watch it, I would say you may like it as a summer popcorn film. This film is 2 hours and 20 minutes and it does drag a bit, but I would say if you're interested in watching Michael Keaton put on the Batman suit again, or you're curious to see Sasha Calle, for some it may be a fun summer popcorn film that celebrates the world of DC. You could see it that way, or celebrates the journey that has been all the way up to this moment. But if you're curious to check this out, if you're hesitant and you want to see a film, you want to see this film specifically, and you want to take a chance, maybe a matinee would be best. I saw this on a regular screen. I didn't see it in IMAX. I didn't see it in 3D. And I was good with the regular screen for this film. I was okay with it. The audio was good. The screen looked good. I was good with that. I will say The Flash, it doesn't end on the high note that it could have. And that's where I feel with this film. As you can tell, it's a mixed bag for me. There were parts I liked. There were parts I saw great hope with. But there were parts that really weighed this down. And my rating for this is a 2.5 out of 5. It is right down the middle. It's a 5 out of 10. It had its good moments, but a lot of moments outweigh those good moments, and you're just stuck in the middle. That is my review of The Flash. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, you can hit the like button and subscribe. I'd greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter, on Letterboxd, and on TikTok at Leading Mohicans. And remember, regardless of what others feel about the things you love, it is always for the agenda. Bye.